What story do you really want to tell but no one has asked the right question for you to bring it up? Once when I lived in Japan, I was riding my bike across a rice field at about 6 AM. The sun was coming up and there was no one anywhere, so rare in Japan. Just me on a dirt road between rice fields for miles and miles and the sound of my bike. Then I heard a saxophone. As I kept riding, eventually I saw a man sitting on a stool practicing his saxophone. Just on the road between rice fields. He nodded a hello to me without breaking play at all. One of the most magical moments of my life. Dude, you were in a Studio Ghibli film. Haha. Just Google it. I'll check them out. Oh wow, you're in for a treat. Some of my favorite childhood movies. I would start with My Neighbor Totoro. Spirited Away is also a favorite. Howl's Moving Castle is lovely too. Okay, I'll stop now. Carry on. Close bracket. So I would occasionally write post-it notes to myself if I was super drunk and something absurd happened. My writing is illegible on most days. I had a note forever in my wallet that looked like it was saying, I'm a something, eat something illegible, cucumber whore. It kept me up at night trying to figure out what it said. About a year later it dawned on me. I saw a man eat a cucumber whole. Some dude at a bar was eating a cucumber like an apple and was so incensed and offensive by questions that I decided to stay away and document it for human history. So combative, yet being so unapologetically human. It's been probably 10 years. I just laughed so hard at cucumber whore that I shook the whole bed and woke up my giant husband. Thanks for that, seriously. A few years ago I was working at a pretty miserable place. When I got off work it had begun to rain and I had no umbrella. The crosswalk was red and there wasn't any shelter from the rain nearby. So I just stood there getting soaked, desperately wishing I could be home. A couple of drunk middle-aged dudes came up waiting to cross the street. I didn't look them in case they got rowdy, but one of the men looked at me and handed me his umbrella. I tried to refuse but he said, "Your head is more precious than mine." Then the light turned green and he stumbled along sharing his friend's umbrella. It was a simple and incredibly kind gesture that made me feel like I mattered. I still have the umbrella, and I'll never forget the moment a drunk old man cheered me up during a dark time. I also hope he didn't regret losing the umbrella after he sobered up. It was a really nice one. Apparently I talk really clearly in my sleep. I had my closest friend sleep over one day in my late teens. According to her, in the middle of the night I sat straight up in bed with my eyes open and glanced out my bedroom window. Then I turned to her, put my fingers over her lips and whispered shhhh, fear coming. I don't remember any of this, but she said she couldn't fall back asleep all night. I also told my boyfriend in my sleep once that he had giraffe arms, giraffe legs and no heart, because I guess I was mad at him in my sleep. I don't ever remember what I said. I talk almost every night according to my partner. This is more just something I wouldn't say to someone other than my therapist, but I moved back in with my dad. I grew up with my mom in another state, and my half-brother walked up to me the other day and gave me a hug. I was super touched but confused. I asked him what that was for, and he said nothing. I just wanted to hug you, and I cried for a good 10 minutes after he walked out of my room. Growing up it wasn't like I didn't get affection, but it was always a reward. I got good grades, they were proud, but never just because. The idea that someone wanted to hug me just because just hit me in a way I wasn't expecting it. Well, this is my most popular comment by a long shot. Thank you everyone for the hugs and well wishes. And the shrubberies, I appreciate it all. My grandfather was working on a US Navy base during WWII as a welder, civilian. When he got his draft letter, he took it to the admiral on base to let him know that he'd be leaving. The admiral called FDR and explained that my grandfather was the best welder he had and that his effort towards the war would be better served if he stayed working in his current role. My family still has a letter from the president to my grandfather, commending him for his work and excusing him from the draft, so long as he continued working at the base. I got to climb into a crack in a glacier in Iceland, and ventured nearly a mile into it. When I was about as far as you could be inside, my stomach started doing flips and my colon started working overtime. I needed to shit, and I needed to do it now, so I dropped my trousers and squeezed one out deep inside a glacier. It is the coolest place I have ever pooped in both senses of the word. Edit. Yes, I wiped. I had TP with me, because your boy always comes prepared. I took the toilet paper back out in my backpack, so the only trace left is the poop itself. I try to follow leave no trace whenever possible, but these were exceptional times. But I did my best given the circumstances. That's some cool shit. When me and my slightly older cousins were kids, they'd try to convince me of falsehoods all the time. I was, and still kind of am, extremely gullible. I fell for hey, gullible is on the ceiling more than once. One day when I was around 11, the elder of my cousins was talking about how he was joining a lacrosse team. I had no idea what that was, so I asked him. He explained the rules and the tools of the game. I was certain that he was lying to me, that it was another prank. There was no effing way people ran around with small baskets on sticks, throwing and catching hardballs. That's insanity. So I smirked, said "Suhuya" and went on my way. For the next several years, whenever someone mentioned lacrosse, I'd snicker, thinking I was privy to a joke. When I was around 17, a friend of mine mentioned that she was going to a lacrosse game. I laughed and said, kind of annoyed, "Yeah, I know the joke, you can drop it. Lacrosse isn't real." She was so confused and looked at me like I was crazy. She insisted it was in fact real. I insisted it wasn't. We looked it up online, sure enough, completely real. I was utterly shocked and way more than a little embarrassed, especially when I thought back to all of my weird responses to mentions of lacrosse. Ugh. Edit. Holy crap y'all, thanks for the awards. My dad was friends with a crow that lived at his workplace for a few years while we lived in Bosnia, and one day Po, as my dad named him, came up to him and started showing my dad that he couldn't fly properly, like really exaggerating how he couldn't fly. So my dad picked him up and put him in an open box and took him home to me and my mom. Po lived with us for a few days and acted like has been with people his whole life, even though he was clearly a wild crow. He ate from our hands and would hang out with us on the patio, and he even let me hold him, which was surprising, given I was about 3 at the time. Bosnia doesn't have a lot of air conditioning, so we always had the sliding door to the patio open, so it's not like Po was trapped. After maybe 3 days he decided he was feeling better and flew off after catching our attention to let us know he was going. My dad never saw him again, since we lived around 10 miles away from where my dad worked, and I guess he never made it back. Still, was a very cool experience to have a pet crow for a few days. Edit. I know it's hashtag cringe to add on like this, but effin' rip to my inbox and thanks for the awards. It's almost scary how intelligent corvids are. There's also compelling evidence they can describe individual people to other crows. So your dad is probably a superhero to the Bosnia crow community. My great-grandfather lived in Kansas when the Dust Bowl hit the US. He and his wife lived in a really small town and he owned the grocery store. After he passed away, my family was going through the stuff in his house and found a box of letters he had hidden from everyone. Every letter was a thank you from different families he helped during the Dust Bowl. People would be running from the Dust Bowl and pass through his town. He would give them free food to last them until they reached their destinations. Many of the letters thanked him for saving their lives and stuff like that. He took this secret to the grave, literally. Not even his wife knew. I've heard mention that maybe she wouldn't have been quite as pleased, but I don't know about that. I just think that's super cool, and I'm very proud of him. I have a lot of weird stories about my family that I never get to tell. Haha Reddit. I didn't realize people would be so interesting in this. Haha. Kind of thought it was just a personal family pride thing. Thank you all for your ideas regarding preserving these memories. I will absolutely look into that. I'll have to touch base with my dad and see if we know who ended up with those letters. Most of my other stories are my grandpa being a dumb teenager in rural Kansas, and think about how I would have never gotten away with that stuff. Haha. I'll have to talk to my dad and see if he has any other stories about my great grandpa. The town is in northern Kansas. I'm pretty sure the population is under 500 people and they have a town museum, which is adorable. I've been there once. Literally has some grandma mistakes. Thank you everyone for explaining what the Dust Bowl is. Look up pictures. It's crazy.